like to talk about two examples out there that I think will signal the path forward for the state and the direction that Lansing should be heading. One is Dow Chemical. In Midland, Michigan, they have the highest percentage of PhDs per capita of any city in the country. Several years back, they realized that they were having a difficult time recruiting people to come to Midland. So what did they do? They went and invested $1 billion of their own money to improve the quality of life in Midland, to improve the arts, to bring in a minor league baseball team, to improve the K-12 system there so that they could recruit the talent that they wanted. And a lot of that, in my mind, is the role of government. And we have been so financially strained in the recent years that we've been neglecting some of this quality of life investment that the state needs to make. The other example I like to cite is Ford Motor Company. When Alan Mulally came in, Ford was in big trouble. He leveraged the farm and he invested in the company. He had to downsize it, but that took money to downsize the company, and he also invested in a new product line. You know, I don't see any of that thinking in Lansing. When we hit financial difficulties, we just do hiring freezes, and that translates into us being even more inefficient in some areas. And I'll give you one example of my frustrations is in purchasing. We have, at any given time, about $20 billion of under contract with various vendors for goods and services. 28 people can't manage a buy that big. And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit where if we go back to our vendors and work with them and say, look, can we get a 5% discount if we give you another year on the end of the contract? We don't have the manpower to even do that. And I don't know that we necessarily need to bring in full-time employees to do that. There's consulting firms throughout the state that are very good and expert at it. And it's the lowest hanging fruit that we have to help address the state's fiscal problem. So it's that Dow kind of thing, the vision about making certain you have a quality of life so you can attract the jobs that you want in the state. And it's the discipline of a Ford to invest to get leaner and more efficient. And we're not doing that in the state. I don't have to tell you, but the number one problem in the state is the jobs. We represent 50% of all job losses in the country over the last 10 years. We've lost upwards of 1 million jobs in the state. 1 in 5 jobs have been lost. And our per capita income in the year 2000, we were in the top 20. After 2010, we're going to be in the bottom 10. So there is dramatic, and no state has ever seen dramatic change like that. And this two-tier wage system that we have now with the auto sector is going to have a tremendous impact on the state's disposable income, which will ripple through, all different layers of the economy, yours included. So we've got a lot of work to do. But the problems that I see are fixable. And I'll just highlight on some of the problems and things that we need to do that are impacting job creation in the state. We've got a complicated business tax that's too high. That's fixable. And when I talk to the business communities, I'll take a little pride of authorship. The version that we passed in the House was much simpler. 24 other states had it. It relied on federal rules, so you didn't get caught up in Treasury and Lansing. And because of political machinations, we ended up with something much different. We wanted to get rid of the SBT because it was too complicated and one of a kind. What did we do? We replaced it with a one-of-a-kind, complicated tax that got a surcharge on top of it after we passed it. And I will say that's the biggest mistake I made. It was getting to June 30 was the deadline. We were told to get a business tax in place so it could take effect in January and have all the paperwork to follow. So Treasury said they needed it done by June 30. So Treasury didn't like the House version. The Senate didn't like the House version. Every chamber except the Michigan chamber basically endorsed the House version because it was not complicated, it wasn't one of a kind. And I caved in. I compromised and agreed to this gross receipts tax, which I'm not a fan of. But that's fixable. I mean, we just got to get the folks to the table and do it. And what I tell the business community is when you're ready, I'm ready. And I do appreciate one of the concerns, which is we just whipsaw the business community once. And then we're going to do it again within 2 or 3 years. But I think take the pain and get it over with. And you're going to have a new set of winners and losers. I mean, there was winners under the SBT, and there's some winners under the MBT, and there's going to be some winners, which means there'll be some losers under the third one if we do it. But if the business community comes to me, I'm going to fully embrace simplifying this tax and reducing its burden on our employers. The other one that frustrates me greatly, and a problem that we got to address, is that we're perceived as a state that's a regulatory nightmare. It's very difficult to do business, not only at the state, but even in the communities that you reside. We have got to streamline the regulatory process. And last May, I was speaking at the Mackinac conference, and I just blurted it out. I've been so frustrated. I blurted it out. If there's not a new director of the DEQ, I'm not passing the budget. We'll do 30-day budgets until there's a change there. And I just didn't surprise the director. I met with him about 6 times. And I have a list of complaints of projects where I thought we were, stifling job growth. And, the DEQ was standing in the way, and they weren't applying the rules on a consistent basis. So we met at least 6 times, and he'd come in and say, my surveys are great, over 90% of the people love us, and we're efficient and fast and good. And so I said, well, either you had a PR problem, or there's a broken department here, one of the two, and I don't care what it is, but fix it. So last May, I get to the point where I'm frustrated, I don't see any change, and then in September I went to the governor and said, hey, I'm serious about this DEQ budget. And she said, look, there'll be a change there, we're going to merge the departments, just give me 90 days to fix it. And she ultimately did. So we fixed that problem, but when you look back, it took CMS Energy that wants to invest billions of dollars in our state to build a clean coal plant. It took 3 years to get that permit issued. The Kennecott mine up in the UP is one of the world's largest reservoirs of nickel. 5 years it took to get that permit issued. You can't do business in the 21st century with this type of mentality. So we have got to get control of state government and get it to be leaner and meaner and more responsive to people that want to invest and grow in our state. So that's a critical one, but can be fixed. This perception of labor, that we're an unfriendly state because of labor. We can take that negative and turn it into a positive. We have got to sit the business community down with labor and say, look, at this reputation, whether perceived or real, is injuring the state. And there's a lot of labor organizations that invest a lot in their people. And I think that there's a way where we can turn this labor issue into a positive, have consistency, and let people know what they're getting into before they get here, and let's have a better relationship with labor, because employers and workers are in the same boat. And that is, we don't have enough business or jobs in the state. So let's work together to turn that image problem around. And then, obviously, our K-12 system is critical. If we're not educating the kids for the 21st century, they're not going to have the opportunity for jobs that we all had when we were growing up. You've seen some improvement on the K-12 with the Race to the Top legislation, where the worst of the worst schools, we're not going to allow them to perform as they have in the past, and if need be, we're just going to take them over. The curriculum has been toughened up, but I think we got to get a little more vision. Even when I was in school wasn't relevant to my life. I mean, it was just kind of a pain, and I went through it because my parents sent me there. But if we can get education connected to the relevancy of their life, kids will embrace it more. And the one thing that gives me hope is technology. My kids are better on my cell phone and computer than I am. This digital age is in their DNA, and we've got to marry the digital age into their curriculum. And you'll find that the example I use is there's this game, Searching for Carmen Sandiego. Well, the kids are learning geography at the same time they're playing a game. And a lot of the disciplines that they need to learn can be baked into programs that the kids will digest. And my kids love to do homework on the computer. They like to do research on the computer. It's the other stuff that happens in the classroom. They get totally bored, and it's not relevant to their life. So I think there's a lot of work we got to do in education. And I read an article about 4 months ago. 40% of our population from 20 to 40 is illiterate. That's impossible to have a knowledge-based economy when you've got that big of a chunk of your young workforce that can't read. And government oftentimes, and I'll pick 2 issues that they do. They always talk about literacy, and they'll talk about obesity. And then there'll be some program, and someone will be the czar of that, and then nothing happens. So I've reached out to my chair of education and said, look, this is literacy thing. There's a lot of ways we can do that without spending a lot of money. But we need to implement something that will have a sustained, driven effort. And a lot of folks that are in that age category don't like to admit it, so they don't show up to go learn how to read. And there's ways where we can do that in the privacy of their own home, or at a library, or through television. We've got to have a sustained effort to get our folks reading. And then obviously the big problem that we deal with all the time here in Lansing is our budget and the shortage of revenues, which means we can't run the government that we're accustomed to. We can't afford it. We need to do these reforms that are on the table now, and there's plenty of them that we all hear about. But the health care reform I'll talk about that we announced last July, we can save, in my mind, it's over $1 billion of savings that we can achieve by consolidating all public sector health care under one umbrella. The state does it now for 50,000. We have about 52,000 people that are employed by the state. And the state goes out and negotiates and provides a health care plan for 50,000 people. We estimate there's somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 different plans when you look at all our cities and our towns and our counties and road commissions and courts and schools. It's insane. In the hospitals, when I announced that plan, we didn't even estimate the savings, but Mike Duggan, who runs the DMC, came to me and said, you're going to cut 15% of my administrative costs out because you're going to standardize. I would suspect we'll have 6 to 10 different plans that, the local bus driver will pick from the same menu as the governor. Everyone will be treated the same in the public sector, but we'll standardize, and you'd have about 10 million people in this pool. And I'm not arguing that the state should run this pool. We would go out to bid, and people would bid on it, and the population would be divided up among the most competitive providers. So it's what we're doing at the state level now. I'm just saying let's increase the scope of it.